Hello and welcome to This Is Scotland, the podcast that looks at the past, present and future of this cracking wee country. My name is Ally Heather.
Hi, and I'm Coinneach MacLeod. How are you, Ally?
Mate, I'm in great form today.
How's your week been?
Packed as always. Something cool that I did that the listeners might be interested in. I climbed up the mast of the Discovery ship. So Dundee's called the City of Discovery. It's got this sort of 100-odd-year-old vessel, big, beautiful wooden ship that sits down by the V&A, just at the banks of the Tay. And they've launched this new kind of fundraiser thing, because it's a charity and it needs all this work done to it constantly, where you can get all roped up and climb your way up the mast. Like, genuinely, you are several hundred feet above the concrete, way more frightening than I anticipated. Incredible views over Dundee, but then you kind of sort of zip line off it. So you zip line off the mast and into the kind of Discovery Centre area, and it's so fun. And you get a real sense, because people used to climb all over these riggings down in the Arctic, in the Antarctic, really exploring the coldest weathers, and to be up these heights on the masts, but going like 30 degrees either side in these kind of swaying waters. It was a great insight, and I really enjoyed myself.
And people can do that. People can book on to do that.
Yeah, they don't do too many days a year, but check out the Discovery's website, because you pay to get on. It's not too dear, but the money obviously gets cycled back into repairing the ship as well.
I like that.
What have you been up to yourself?
Well, I couldn't do that because I've got terrible vertigo, but I was also climbing. But I was climbing a mountain, the largest mountain in the Outer Hebrides.
Sure.
We've only got one, I think. Well, our highest mountain's a Corbett, so we've got no Munros in the Outer Hebrides. It's a Cleasham on the Isle of Hattis.
How do you say it, sorry?
Cleasham. The Cleasham on the Isle of Hattis. And it's a cracking, especially if you can get it on a good day. And we had a beautiful day, climbing up the Cleasham, beautiful views over the other islands. And yeah, it was lovely.
My East Coast prejudice about Harris Hills is they're all really squidgy. Like when you everywhere you walk, you're squinting in a bog.
Peaty. It's a peaty mountain.
Squelching your way up, squelching your way down, kind of thing.
But it was really lovely. Great weather. We picnic at the top. A wee bit windy on the top, but definitely worth. If you are doing Hattis,
lovely.
Because I had been down in Tarbert at the amazing Isle of Hattis distillery, so that was the perfect day. A few drams of the distillery after a walk up the Cleasham. So absolutely perfect.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
I didn't have any drams going up the Discovery, but today we've got a packed show. The things we want to chat about today were Outlander, because that's just coming to an end, but the impacts are still very much being felt across the summer. So chat about Outlander. We'll chat about travels to the Outer Hebrides, because we both have so much we want to chat about that. Some historical stories coming out there and some kind of modern experiences, and the time that I took a busload of members of Parliament around Harris and Lewis. Stay tuned for that. And also we're chatting about Gaelic and Scots languages, our relationships with them, and the attempts at revival. And we'll kind of talk about how all that is going. So loads to discuss, but let's jump straight into Outlander.
I mean, where do you even start with this absolute phenomenon? But maybe that's just for if you have been living under a rock for the past 20, 30 years. Author Diana Gabaldon started this series of books. They've turned into something unbelievably special. Like, is it 60, 70, 80 million books that have been sold?
Wow, that's nearly as many as you. Right, just for the folk that aren't quite aware of exactly what happens. Basically, Outlander, and this is with full respect, it's like a sort of a sexy time travel fantasy where a modern woman falls through a standing stone and finds herself amidst the Jacobite risings and finds herself a really hunky Highlander. And on the surface,
I've tried that. How many times have I gone to the Colony Stones?
Honestly, there are memes and like sort of trends on sort of TikTok and Instagram of like sort of American women coming here on holiday and sprinting towards standing stones, hoping to tumble back and meet hunky Highlanders from yesteryear. Wow. But it is like, the thing about the book is, because it could just be a kind of bodice ripper, like a kind of a sexy fantasy romance, which it definitely is.
Yeah.
But it's so like unreasonably well written and
Sure.
so well researched. Diana Gabaldon, who wrote it, really got to know her subject matter. I remember, can I tell you about the first time I watched it?
Sure.
So this would have been about 2015. I think it was just coming out in Scotland.
Yeah.
And I was studying Jacobite history at Aberdeen University. And me and my absolute nerd mates got our notebooks and like, right, let's watch an episode of this American TV show about Scotland and we'll correct all the factual errors. So we sat down to watch an episode about the Battle of Preston Pans. Like big Outlander heads, you'll know the wider context of this. But basically, the Battle of Preston Pans was a great Jacobite victory outside of Edinburgh. And we watched it, and the show was incredibly accurate. So their outfits were bang on. The tactics of the battle were spot on, even to the extent where this battle was fought just outside Edinburgh in the fog. And a farmer approached the Jacobite camp and said, I know a secret way through the moors so you can attack the British army from the rear, which they're not ready for. And that happened in Outlander. The farmer turns up and Johnny Cope, the British general, gets chased off and flees and abandons his army. And everything there was bang on. So Outlander, as much as it's got this big, sexy time travel layer on top, which is good fun, nothing wrong with that.
Sure.
The core Scottish history underneath, I was really impressed at.
Well, I mean, I've been so lucky over the past few years to do a few events with the author Diana Gabaldon.
Oh, no way.
On my US tours, she lives in this beautiful town called Scottsdale, Arizona.
Oh, yeah.
And we've hosted events together. They've been amazing. So
Yeah.
I've chatted about my books, she's chatted about hers. And it was fascinating learning about her journey to becoming an author and also her journey to deciding the storyline as well.
Yeah.
I know some people might know this, but I think she worked in the sciences as a biologist or a chemist or something like that, but always dreamed of being an author.
Sure.
She sat down one night, put on the TV, and there was an episode of Doctor Who.
Is that right?
And she went, time travel, that's a good idea. Scribbled that in her wee book.
Yeah.
Went back a few weeks later. So another episode of Doctor Who. And when the second Doctor, Patrick Troughton, was the Doctor,
Sure.
he had an assistant. It was played by Fraser Hines. The character's name was James McCrimmon, and he wore a kilt. He was Scottish, and he is the longest-serving assistant in the TARDIS. And she went, Scotland, kilts, that's a good idea too. Scribbled that in her book. Then I think either she was in Boston or was working at a university in Boston, went to the second-hand bookshop, said to the bookseller, do you have any books in Scotland? Just want something. And he was like, I don't have much, but I've got a
stack of cookbooks I can't sell. This bloody,
that.
baker guy.
They were all sold out. But he said there was a Scottish Gaelic dictionary there. And so she took that with her. And that is the whole journey. She had never been to Scotland at that point, but as you say, had insight into her history, into her culture, with that wonderful layer of romance and mysticism, which just brings it all together. It is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And not only the books, because they're chunky.
Yeah.
They're big books to read. But the people love them. It is. I actually. Could you say that it has changed Scotland? For many people, it's changed the perception of Scotland, it's changed the Scottish tourism industry.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm trying to think what else has done that to Scotland in this kind of recent history.
Well, that's it. So I would say, I think we understand the phenomenon more about being on the receiving end of this new wave of visitors, mostly from America, but also from Germany and other parts of the world, where they come to Scotland and in one way they are so overjoyed because what they find is what's in the show, in that it's a culturally rich place with these amazing romantic ruins, incredible standing stones, but in another way disappointed because none of us look like Sam Heughan except Sam Heughan.
Well, shall we talk about Sam Heughan? Because
you get a twinkle in your eye when we do, so why not?
I mean, he's a hunk. He is an absolute hunk. And he has, for many people, is he the new Sean Connery? Is he he has been absolutely become the figurehead for many people of Scotland. I mean, I even saw his face on the Caledonian Sleeper as it went past a couple of days ago.
Totally.
So he's a great representation.
Well, he's taken on the ambassadorial role really strongly. Yeah. Like quite an early stage of Outlander, when it was becoming clear how big it was, he was really out front and centre, speaking up for Scotland, speaking up for his part of it, Dumfries and Galloway, which I think does need an ambassador.
Well, it's a good point. It's obviously, we're from very different parts of Scotland, and maybe the parts that are more recognised when you talk about the Highlands, the Islands, and all those kind of things as well. So you're right, he's from a part of the country that maybe people don't think when they're doing that classic tour from Edinburgh and going north, that they maybe don't think of going south. So he has absolutely become a great ambassador for the area.
Totally. It's something that I've really experienced travelling about, is how it's really brought money into places that were needing it in terms of looking after our heritage. So when I was younger, I worked for Historic Environment Scotland, or Historic Scotland as it was then, and I was something called a roving steward. I was based out of Linlithgow Palace, and I would go, like, when people were taking their annual leave for the other sites around the area, I'd go and cover them for a few weeks. And one place I regularly covered was Blackness Castle. And so this is a castle. It's stunning. It kind of juts
kind
out.
of Fort William, was it?
No, not at all. It's a little fortress that juts out into the Firth.
Do you know what it is? Yeah. It plays Fort William in the series.
You're bang on. You're bang on. I think it does. And so it juts out into the water. It's built on a craggy rock. So the courtyard is full of these big crags. It's called the ship that never sailed because it looks like the prow of a ship out into the water. But when I worked there, it was deathly quiet. Like, it was such a cool castle, cost a fortune to maintain and run, and nobody was really going. Just at the tail end of my time, 2014, we started to get visitors saying, "Oh, I'm here for Outlander," and we'd never heard of it, because me and the two guys that worked there, one of them was a piper, we hadn't read the books, and the TV show hadn't come out yet. Now, Blackness Castle is Ramo. It's popular. It's loads of people are going to visit. People are getting loads of pictures with it. It is now getting the income and the respect it deserves as an amazing site. And it's now been reused. I saw it. It popped up in Mary Queen of Scots, the Saoirse Ronan film. It pops up in there as her palace as well. So it's now being used, filming location. It's bustling. I'm sure the businesses around there are doing great.
And similarly, I guess, with what they call, I think it's called Lallebroch, isn't it?
Yes.
And Jamie Fraser's home in the show. That's Midhope Castle, isn't it? Sort of near Edinburgh, isn't it?
Yeah, again, Midhope Castle. And these things are doing the great thing of getting people out of Edinburgh. Yes. So it's like spreading people into places you might not otherwise go. A place that's doing a really nice visit for visitors is Falkland, the village in Fife, where you have Falkland Palace. I think that doubled as Inverness, and it's got the classic spot where they see the ghost in episode 1, and it turns out to be, well, no spoilers actually, but you see the ghost of the Jacobite soldier at the start of the series, and it is Inverness that you see there.
It's 1940s and 1960s Inverness.
It's so handsome, and this is a great town because it can take a bit of visitors. It's like really handsome, looks the part. You got Ben Lomond there to go for a walk. You got Falkland Palace, which is now getting far more visitors through, and you've also got great places to eat, like the food scene in Falkland, very strong. A good pub which does good scran. But I would say something that people don't know, and I love telling people, is remember WikiLeaks? Julian Assange and all that.
Right.
When loads of big companies had all their details hacked and leaked online. Sony, who were distributing Outlander in the UK, there's messages between a bunch of their Highegians saying David Cameron is petitioning us to not release Outlander before the independence referendum. So that's that's WikiLeaks email. Like, no one's ever said it's not true. David Cameron was approaching the people that were releasing Outlander saying don't release it before the independence referendum. The subtext being, if Scots get too excited about their past, they might vote for independence. And so it didn't come out until after the referendum. And it seems from that email to me to be because David Cameron's putting pressure on them.
Do you know, it's interesting because you talked about how factually correct the series is as well, which maybe isn't the case with many other movies and TV shows that have been about Scotland. So we should absolutely celebrate that not only is it bringing people here, but they are getting that kind of factual realness.
We should trigger warning it that it's very sexy. I blushed.
It's very sexy.
God, like I sat down. Me and my partner Zoe were traveling with two Americans out in Skye, and they're like, "Oh, you've never seen Outlander? You've got to sit and watch." So Zoe had never seen a second of it. Oh, we'll sit and watch it together. Within about a minute and a half, they are having the business. They're having at it in an abandoned church. And me and Zoe don't know where to look. She's a good Highland girl. Goodness. And so, honestly, I would say, if you're going to go and watch it, fast forward through those bits and just enjoy the history.
It's really all about the history. Yeah,
so.
Absolutely.
I think so.
You're listening to This is Scotland. We'll be right back.
Ali, if you had to describe Scotland in one sound, what would it be?
For me, probably like the bird song, because wherever you are in Scotland, you've got the distinct accompaniment of like seagulls down by the harbour, or moving inland, the songbirds of the forests, or right at the Highland plateaus. You get those really distinct rare birds that only live here. What about yourself?
For me, I'd say it's just hearing the stories and songs around Scotland.
And that's what Scotland's about, isn't it? It's a place of stories, people, places, history, food, music, and memories.
And for generations, the Scots Magazine has been telling those stories, bringing Scotland into homes around the world.
So if Scotland means something to you,
bring it home.
Subscribe today at scotsmagazine.com and enjoy Scotland stories every month.
It's been a phenomenon. I think Diana's done an amazing job. I think apart from her husband, who I've met, I'm one of the only people in the world that can honestly say I have walked Diana Gabaldon up the aisle of a church twice now, which is quite interesting to do in front of her husband. But she is amazing, warm. Diana's everything you hope Diana would be. She's warm, she's engaging, she's interested, and now obviously travels to Scotland frequently, and it's a total joy to hang out with.
That's it.
A total joy to hang out
over,
with.
But if I could hope for if I could hope for anything,
let's see. I wonder. I still think she's got something up her sleeve.
Outlander, the TV series, I think, is all done and dusted. But I hope that the legacy of it is, one, Sam becoming an ambassador for Scotland long term and really bringing Dumfries and Galloway up as a big visitor attraction.
Yeah.
And also I hope that people keep coming to these more out of the way Outlander filming locations. And I think we should just, that place where they have the standing stones, where she disappears through the standing stones, I think we should just build them. Build, like Hobbiton is an amazing visitor attraction in New Zealand. We should have a standing stone visitor centre there where they just put a bunch of granite menhirs in the place where the stones are. People can go and visit and get their pictures.
100%.
Anyway, we should move on.
So, let's talk about something that's very close to both our hearts, and that's the languages of Scotland.
Yes.
As a Scots speaker and a Gaelic speaker, do you feel... I sometimes feel I've got two jobs in a way. One is to make sure I speak the language as much as I can when there's people around me who are also speaking Gaelic, so it's heard. But also as a speaker of a minority language, you feel like you must be an ambassador for the language as well. So it's nearly as if you've got two roles. Would you sort of agree with you on Scots?
With Scots, I really struggle with it, I would say, because so often I'm still in my work not to use it, or we can't have it, or there's no space for it. Like I kind of get to write in it, I kind of get to broadcast in it, and so the chances to use it are so slim. And on my social media, I get this really tricky thing where when I try and use more Scots, I get people having a go at me for using Scots. And then when I try and use more English, I get all my pals in Angus slagging me off for going pan loaf, which is what you call speaking posh. And I find with Scots, because it's so close with English, folk are unsure about it, uncertain about exactly what to do with it, because it's quite dialectical. So I would say Scots has always been a tricky one for me, because I just want to celebrate it and be proud of it. And it's still in this really tricky halfway house. But let's chat about Gaelic first. So I studied Gaelic at Aberdeen Uni just for a year, and loads of people did. And when I was there was a real buzz. This is 2014, 2015, first year uni. Loads of folk were diving into the Gaelic. What you had were some like Lewisachs who were on the course, who came from a Gaelic household but hadn't learnt the Gaelic and were wanting to find their way to really study and understand the language, which is great. Then you had loads of Germans and a Finn who were just like keen to understand Gaelic a bit more. And then you had like narrow-minded, brain-dead nationalists like myself, who just thought, here's a language of Scotland we should master because it'll help us understand this country.
Well, I mean, first, I suppose, again, we talked about it being a minority language. For those of you maybe who don't know too much about the language, there is now roughly around, in the last census, about 60,000 people who speak the language of Gaelic. So it very much is a minority language, but one that has been part of our country for literally centuries. But it has had a very tumultuous history. And I'm even talking recent history. You know, me growing up, 70s, 80s, there was a real suppression of the language, particularly in school. You were not allowed to speak it in school. There was no such thing as Gaelic schools. So you felt, and certainly when I moved to the mainland, again felt a little embarrassed by it. We were made to feel a little embarrassed. We were the kind of country bumpkins because we spoke this other language. And you see that even in our, if you look at television at the time or media at the time, you know, probably the most famous thing seen about the Hebrides was a naked video, or OHBC News, Airdrie Hebrides Broadcasting Competition, this wee comedy sketch, which was hilarious by Gregor Fisher, but it was like really kind of taking the mick out of us, and it was brilliant. But that's really the perception of that Scotland had of the Hebrides. And the Westminster government certainly damaged the language of Gaelic.
But so did the Scots. We were so prejudiced against it.
Yeah,
we still are. We still are.
I mean, one thing that's very interesting for me is, talking about the language and the investment in the language. I mean, put into context, the Scottish government pay around 35 million-ish a year.
Just for any listeners that aren't in Scotland, that aren't aware of how sensitive that debate is, every time that, say, a police car gets the Gaelic written on it, or an ambulance
road sign
has, like, so Arbroath just got an updated road, and so they got a bunch of signs that had the English place name and then the Gaelic place name underneath, and folk are raging, waste of money. And that's what people say all the time. This is mad. Gaelic was never spoken here. This is a waste of money.
I mean, it's fascinating. It's a fascinating argument for a country that, you know, say in Argyll you see the same thing, and Argyll of course has a really strong Gaelic history, one of the strongest parts, of course, because Gaelic came from, of course, the language of Gaelica. So St. Columba came with Christianity and that language first. It intermingled with Old Norse because we were part of the Kingdom of Man at the time, and that's why you have this mixture. The further you go north from Argyll, that there's more influence of Old Norse in Lewis Gaelic, etc. But the whole budget for Gaelic in Scotland is around 35 million. That's how much it's invested. I'm talking in broadcasting, education, development. I was trying to think how to put that into context. So EastEnders, which is a BBC soap opera, okay, the budget for that each year is around 50 million.
Wow.
Okay, so to put into context, the whole of Gaelic in Scotland is cheaper than EastEnders. And EastEnders, when they rebuilt Albert Square a couple of years ago, cost £87 million. So everything is relative. You know, everything is relative. There's always going to be somebody that says, but think of the children, think of the hospitals, think of the roads. But at the same time, the Gaelic language is so important to us. And I think that has been significant changes in mindset, even though there's still people who are challenged by it, but I think the Gaelic medium education now.
So that is like, so schools. There's a handful of schools around Scotland.
A big handful of schools across the country. There's now Gaelic medium education. Finally, actually, in on the island of Lewis, which was one of the last ones to get a Gaelic medium education, and that is when you go from the age of 5 throughout your school education, learning your studies from Gaelic. It's a huge change for us to be able, for children to be able to do that.
And like Lewis, like the Outer Hebrides, it's about 60% Gaelic speaking. Just for context, it's a good chunk. According to the census, over 60% of folks speak Gaelic.
I mean, so the
numbers aren't high, but you've got this regional concentration.
Absolute regional concentration. The channel, the BBC channel, BBC Alba, of course, has made a huge difference as well, where we can watch the news, watch sport, watch documentaries in the language of Gaelic. I mean, it just makes a huge difference. Watching Serie A, watching Napoli against Bologna with Gaelic commentary is one of the most wonderful things to do in the world.
That's cool.
So I think there is a national Gaelic language plan, which I think is up to now 2028. So all these things do help the language, but it is changing. We have to accept that it's change. The declining population of the kind of core area of Gaelic, which it is the Hebrides and the Northwest. The declining population, the aging population, that is very much goes against the language, because we do, of course, and we celebrate people coming to stay, new people coming to the area, but maybe they don't have Gaelic, and that's a house that had Gaelic for 100 years now does not have Gaelic in it. So as much as I'm excited that there is an element of a revival, be that a little bit through Duolingo or Joy and Column doing Speak Gaelic, or all this kind of digital and social influencers who are using Gaelic in a wonderful way, it's still in such a precarious place.
It does feel it. It feels like, because I had this brief moment in Aberdeen where my partner at the time was a Gaelic speaker, my flatmate at the time spoke fluent Gaelic. I was studying it through the day, then in the evenings there was like a Gaelic choir and a Gaelic there was Gaelic theatre on quite often at quite a folk level. There was like Gaelic singers kicking about. It felt like the revival was only going to gather pace, but it doesn't feel like that now. It feels like there's a kind of like a skin deep Gaelic has been laid across Scotland, but that real rootedness of Gaelic is still struggling. And with Scots, it's not dissimilar. For them that aren't aware, Scots is a Germanic language spoken around the east coast of Scotland, mostly in rural or urban working class environments. It came over. Everyone's heard of the Anglo-Saxons, right? So the Anglo-Saxons were actually two groups, the Angles and the Saxons. The Saxons, they came across from sort of Jutland area, like Denmark sort of way, northern Germany. The Saxons settled in mostly southeast England, and the Angles settled further northeast England and around where Edinburgh is. And the dialect of Saxon, that Germanic dialect, grew into modern English, and the dialect of Anglic grew into modern Scots.
Okay.
And Anglic got really informed by the Gaelic it met, and the Norse that it met in those areas, and formed, and also huge influences from Latin and from French, which formed what is now the modern Scots language. And it was recognised as our national language. All the law documents are in Scots. All our great poetry was in Scots for centuries from all the court makers. But the 1872 Education Act said the language of education in our classrooms shall be English. Yep. And that was a death knell for Gaelic. For Scots, it was a longer one, because it's all very well saying you hate to speak English, but if Abdi in the Hale area only speaks Scots and you can't hear English anywhere, you're never going to speak anything other than Scots. And English travellers talk about coming up to Scotland and it just being dense Scots speaking. It was the arrival of radio and television broadcasting London English into Scotland that meant Scots started to go into decline. Today, still 1/3 of people in Scotland speak Scots. I grew up in a Scots-speaking village, grew up very contentedly bilingual. The older folk were very fluent Scots speakers and were able to switch between Scots and English. Folk my generation, it collapsed down to just being a kind of mixter-maxter. We kind of speak Scottish standard English with lots of Scots through it. And what I've been trying to work to do is get the younger generation to recognise the two hemispheres of language they have, so you can use them like hot and cold taps. Speak Scots when it's appropriate, have that bilingualism, then speak English when it suits you. But it was that decline, like my village, Newbiggin, it was a place with a quarry, like a stone quarry for stones for the road. So about 1/3 of the village worked at the quarry. So Abdi there could just live and work entirely in Scots. A lot of the rest were farm workers, and all the farm labourers were Scots speakers. And then you had the local pub where you could go and speak it, you had the garage, and you had this whole community, the school as well, we could live and work in the Scots language. The total economic change of the area, quarry shut, nobody works in the fields anymore, it became a commuter town for out-of-towners, and that just made it an English language settlement. And so when I was wee, our primary school won the best Scots language school in Scotland. But these days it's just no like that because of the economic shift.
Yeah.
And I don't know, there's good efforts at the grassroots to try and protect it and to try and bring it back. But it's a real struggle because you've got to give people a way to live through the language, not merely to use it on special occasions, but to live through it.
You're right. And I think we can reflect on places elsewhere who are doing that very well. You know, I was fortunate enough to go to the Faroe Islands recently, and the language of Faroese, which is probably the closest to Old Norse. I mean, the Gaelic language is a sprinkling of it, but is the closest to Old Norse. You know, Faroese, you know, is still owned by Denmark. Danish was very much the lead language for some time, but everybody speaks Faroese. There, everybody speaks Faroese, and it is their language.
That's it,
and it's absolutely celebrated there and protected. Icelandic the same. So let's do that with Gaelic and Scots here. Let's not fight it. You know what I mean? There's no for Gaelic to be celebrated or Scots to be celebrated is not against anybody. You know, let's make it part of our identity. And if you're not, you don't need to speak it. You know what I mean? But there's many people who do, and we should be so proud of our cultural differences in Scotland. We're quite unique to have these three languages, aren't we?
Like, because the Swiss do a great job. So the Swiss have 4 official languages, and they broadcast in all of them. And you have like your French speaking bit, your German speaking bit, your Italian speaking bit, etc. But they have equal sort of parity of respect at state level. And yeah, on the ground they all take the piss at each other. But at state level there's that a parity of respect, a parity of funding. And I think all we need to do with Scots is celebrate the regionality of it. Like Shetland Scots is so cool and different. Ayrshire Scots, like the Scots of Moray, like you'd want to harness that powerful regionality, but then also find a way to communicate nationally in it, which isn't the easiest thing. But we should move on, because literally we could speak about this all day. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you're a listener, when you travel, if you're traveling around Scotland, how do you feel about hearing these different dialects? Like when you go to Aberdeenshire, how do you find chatting away to folk there? Or if you're Fae Orkney, how do you feel coming down when you moved down for university? How do you feel people respond to your way of speaking? Or if you're one of these young Gaelic learners who's getting towards fluency, there is a tension, I hear, between born Gaelic speakers and folk that learn it. How do you find about trying to enter into the Gaeltacht? Yeah. Like, I want to hear all that.
Yeah, no, we're excited. But again, it's one of those, we're very proud of our languages that we speak. And so if you are a speaker of Gaelic or Scots, be proud of it, celebrate it, be that ambassador as well as the speaker. And as we say, cowmorst, keep going.
That's it. So if we get enough support for it, we might just start doing like a Scots language special, This is Scotland, where it's just me speaking at you. And then we'll do a Gaelic special where it's just you speaking to me and me going, Kirst galore. Anyway.
It does flow pretty well into speaking about Gaelic. And now we're going to chat about some amazing journeys to the Outer Hebrides in history, and maybe even if we've got time, some of our journeys to the Hebrides as well.
Well, I will. I'll tell when we have time. I'll tell you because not too long ago when I was working at Westminster, I was working on the John Nicholson, the MP for the SNP, managed to get a Gaelic and Scots inquiry by the Culture Committee of Westminster, which I was working on, basically to show how vulnerable the languages are and how they need support from Westminster. And I basically had to travel around in a minibus around the Outer Hebrides with a bunch of Tory, Labour and Lib Dem English politicians who had never heard of Gaelic or the Gaeltacht or the Outer Hebrides, and try and explain to them what was going on. But let's
and was that successful?
Oh, yes. But I'll tell you about that in a minute.
Well, I sort of wanted to start with maybe 2 books that became in the 18th century quite big statements about this journey to the Hebrides. Samuel Johnson, who was an English literary figure, and James Boswell from born in Edinburgh, but a kind of Ayrshire family. They wrote these 2 books. They travelled together, but they wrote their own separate books. Johnson's book was A Journey to the Western Islands of Scotland, and Boswell, The Journal of a Tour of the Hebrides, but based on the same tour. And it was fascinating very much to see these different perspectives of the islands.
So what were they
went
there
to
in the 1700s? What were they seeing? Because it was like, for them it was a big adventure. Like, Scotland had only recently stopped being in a kind of state of civil war with the Jacobites, and for a kind of a educated Englishman to be travelling around the Outer Hebrides was a big risk, a big adventure, a big undertaking.
It was fascinating.
What did he find?
And say when they went to Skye, for example, they crossed over to the island kind of 1773, and were kind of shocked. People were on horse and cart. They suddenly felt that they were going somewhere very primitive. They really felt they had kind of stepped back in time in the difficulty of travel, what they were used to maybe in the cities or down south. They just weren't getting there. I mean, it says in Skye, Johnson sees difficulty, distance, and social change. Boswell sees dinners, conversations, and Johnson trying to make sense of it all. What their perception of is absolutely fascinating. But they went to Skye, they went to Raasay, Col, Mull, Alva, Iona. They really did a fascinating tour. And they talk about the welcome they get in some places. They really talk about the human detail in these books. They are fascinating kind of moments of history, these novels, and they're very much worth it if you are doing a Hebridean tour, just to see how it was done.
Well, I've gone and bought
250 years ago.
Yeah,
or so.
I've gone and bought that since you were wanting to chat about this. I went and bought it, and it is available in one volume with both books back to back.
Right.
And it seems fascinating because Johnson's quite a controversial character. He travelled up through St Andrews and was winding down at St Andrews University. But Robert Ferguson, the great Scots poet of Edinburgh, wrote this long poem slagging him off and slagging off the people that are wining and dining him, because Johnson had been anti-Scottish. He'd written the first proper dictionary of the English language, and in it he'd slagged off Scotland on a number of occasions. And one of the things he said, the definition of oats was a foodstuff for horses in England and people in Scotland.
Yes.
And his mate Jimmy Boswell, I think, was part of the motivation to get him up to Scotland to be like, hey, there's actually loads going on here. It's a very culturally rich, interesting place. You don't know what you're talking about. And so Johnson's initial tour, certainly at the East Coast, was marred by controversy because people just couldn't stand this overfed, conceited Englishman coming up here and sneering at the locals. But I don't think that comes across in the books so much. I think he's a genuine curious guy.
Yeah, there's curiosity in the books. There's discussion on, the people, the hospitality, the landscapes, where they are culturally as well. And as I said, it's these moments in time, as I said, that's late 1700s. It's kind of positioning that, I should say, what else is going on in the country at the time. And kind of there's a reason, even though maybe we don't agree with everything in the books, why these types of books matter.
Yes.
We do learn, and we can really reflect on that at the time.
Yeah, I think like reading old travelogues is one of my absolute favourite things. Like Martin travelled around the islands as well, and he made incredible reports back of what he found. He was a Gaelic speaking traveller, and that's rare. Getting a Gael to travel around the Gaeltacht and report back, because these are mostly outsider accounts. But you get so many like the travellers in the Highlands and Islands in those days. I remember, I think it's Thomas Pennant who witnessed a funerary procession where they were drinking and dancing with the body as they danced the body to the graveyard, making kind of groaning, moaning funerary songs and dancing spookily from the clachan to the graveyard, which gives me the heebie-jeebies. I think we might be descended from total weirdos. That's one of my big theories. But something I wanted to talk about, because it's not that well known here. Like, these days, and it's good, Scotland's role in colonial expansion is looked at and discussed, and there's obviously things that we went out and did that were horrendous and horrible, and there's things we went out and did that were really positive and enlightening. But the whole idea of being a civilizing force, we practiced on ourselves. So lowland Scots Protestants in the late 1500s, this is Reformation period.
Yeah, so you're talking about King James VI.
King James VI, we thought we had advanced farming practices, we could really turn the land to good account, and we had good Protestant work ethic and education. So what happened was these people called the Fife Gentlemen Adventurers, a group of Fife landowners, they've got permission from King James VI to go and take 600 soldiers and people to go and form an aggressive colonial settlement on Lewis.
Correct.
Now, that's near where Stornoway is now. They set up a little primitive village, and the whole idea was just to take the land from the ne'er-do-well Gaels who couldn't look after themselves, who were letting the land go to waste, who were uncivilized, and who hadn't reformed properly. And we start this aggressive colonial expansion.
And it was a huge, at its core, again, was the eradication of the Gaelic language.
Yeah.
They just felt that we were out of control, just speaking a different language, doing things differently, things that we had done throughout the centuries. And the good news is they got battered. They got absolutely battered.
They got battered.
But again, the impact, and it's so fascinating. Again, we think of our own country and why they saw that as such a negative thing. Why did they see the language and the people as such a challenge to them?
Yes.
Challenge to, would you call it Edinburgh or the monarchy? It's such a fascinating thing.
But the thing is that racism that underlined, or informed that, really got more and more developed as the years went on. Can I tell you something, actually, I don't think most people know? Burke and Hare. So in Edinburgh, just very briefly, for those that aren't aware, there was these two guys, Burke and Hare, Edmund Burke, Edmund Hare, who sold bodies to surgeons in Edinburgh to practice their surgery on at a time when that was illegal. And it started out, there was someone that died in their care, like in the guest house they ran, and they sold the corpse to a professor called John Knox, who was the surgeon. But then they started murdering people and selling the bodies to John Knox. Right, that's horrible. But it was a whole controversy. But John Knox got away with it, and he ended up publishing a book on anatomy in which he showed that the Celts were a separate and inferior race to the Saxon. Now, it's mad to think about. In Scotland today, we still have racism, but the idea that you could tell one Scot apart from another based purely racially. And he said when you cut them open, it's basically chalk and cheese. You look inside a Celt, completely different setup, much different head shape, different brain size. It's just not the same as the Saxon. And it is that propensity, they're just much more an emotional people, and that's why they like simple things like Catholicism and Gaelic, and that's why they can't advance to the civilization of Protestantism and speaking the good Saxon tongue. So there was this long period when we genuinely believed you could draw a line across Scotland and the Gael was racially inferior.
Absolutely. Yeah, and the Statutes of Iona, 1609, that absolutely accelerated that.
Just
the decline in Gaelic. Well, basically the law sought to eradicate the Gaelic language. It forbid traditional practices, outlawed bards, the kind of poetry of the islands as well.
Huge part of the culture.
And absolutely enforced English attendance at schools. So again, we're talking about travels in lots of different ways.
Yeah.
Wistfully by some, challenged by others. Luckily, these days, most people go to the Hebrides in a more positive way.
And that's what I'd say. Every time you go to the Hebrides, every time that you go and spend time in the Outer Hebrides today, engaging with the Gaelic culture. Say you go out for Heb Celt, for the music festivals. Say you go out for the Mod, which I think is going to be in Stornoway in 2027. When you head to the Hebrides, you are part of a reclaiming of that space, of a re-acknowledgement of that culture that was so impacted for hundreds of years. You're part of bringing life back to those places. So I think everything that you can do to buy products from the Outer Hebrides, to engage with Gaelic, to go and travel there, spend time, spend money, and give care and respect to that place, you're part of a healing process, I think.
It's an amazing... I am obviously very biased, and I absolutely love the islands so much.
Yeah.
And we are talking about the Outer Hebrides here. So we're talking from the islands of Battersea and Barra in the south up to Lewis.
I'm not speaking about you, north. Butte. But
well, that's another episode. Yeah. That's an absolute other episode.
Yeah.
But they're a wonderful set of islands, and I know you've travelled there a lot. So even though I could talk about them for hours, what are some of your highlights? If you were kind of visiting again and the chance to pick maybe three places that you would absolutely want to return to.
So genuinely, I do think that getting the crack in Stornoway is unreal. So Stornoway hilariously gets slagged off by other people in Lewis, really it's just a ugly port town. It's very rough folk down there. It's got a reputation.
There is a bit of a rivalry between the town folk and the country folk. That totally might be, and it's actually interesting. Reading Douglas Stewart's new book, I think I mentioned it, John of John, and he does do that extremely well between as the townies call the country folk, the Maws. That's the kind of like derogatory nickname of country folk like us. Stornoway, I guess, even when I was growing up, still seemed like quite a big place. You know, I would maybe get the chance to go there once, maybe twice a year as a young kid. So it did feel like a big moment to go to Stornoway. And Stornoway has changed a lot because of now the cruise terminal. Come in here. You know, it's vibrant, it's busy, the shops are full, and it feels very special. And I should say Hebkelt, which I have to say, I think it's, if not the best, one of the best island festivals. I know there's lots, but it is a wonderful music festival and what comes along with it.
So I would just say, get to Stornoway because it's bouncing, and it's that thing of like you're 3 hours out of Ullapool, and you sometimes do get this idea of the Hebrides being like sort of mystical or over-romanticised, but actually it's just a bustling, great town, full of folk, loads going on, and you can engage with the kind of Hebridean culture in an urban setting, which I think is good. The Coinneach standing stones. So it is just the most amazing, ethereal place. Like, this is a kind of standing stone. There's a circular element, but there's also kind of linear elements, and there are more than a dozen of these really beautiful standing stones, standing well over, what we're talking, like 10 foot high, some of these.
12, 14 feet,
12, 14 feet. But they stand in such an amazing raised part of the landscape as well. It is a place that must be seen. If you are Scottish or you care about this place, it is one of the great wonders of the country.
And exciting that the new visitor centres, fingers crossed, will be open this summer as well, which will be great for the stones and the island as well.
I like the marketing slogan they've gone for. Coinneach, make Stonehenge look shite. It's such a cool place. And the third one, I would just say the beaches of Harris. Like, it's the most obvious thing in the entire world. But the Isle of Harris which isn't an island. I don't know what you're talking about. The Isles of Harris and Lewis, big rival islands. Well, it's just one big island. You're attached. What's going on?
We are attached, yes.
You're not different islands.
So long story. listen to the first podcast.
But so Harris, the beaches on Harris. Harris is stunningly beautiful. You mentioned the hill you were up, but the beaches there. Go and spend time on the beaches. You'll get them so quiet to yourself. It's really lovely.
Yeah, I mean, all the ones you said, absolutely. If we're sticking on Lewis, head into Museum na Nílan at the castle, Lewis Castle in Stornoway. Gives a real insight when you arrive on the island. And as we mentioned before, that's where 6 of the Lewis chessmen are as well. So a great moment to start your tour. If you're over on the west side at Coinneach, please go and visit one of the Black Houses. You've got 2 options. You've got Arnold Black House and then you've got Garranan Black House Village. Both just wonderful insights into our recent history and how we lived and what type of housing and culture we had in those days. Makes it really, really special indeed. I can't not talk about the southern Outer Hebrides as well, although I'll get cursed for sure. So I think going to see what FIFA say is one of the best football pitches in the world on Eriskay. It's an absolute must. Eriskay is a beautiful island, from the Eriskay ponies to its football pitch. What unique culture between those things. And I love the island of Eriskay. So go and watch a football match at Eriskay, and that would make me very happy.
Okay, and so I like to leave every episode just telling you a little history thing that hopefully you don't know, a nice little detail. On Eriskay, there's this beautiful sort of cockle shell beach called the Prince's Beach. It's just where the Calmac arrives fae Barra, and beautiful beach, a bit rocky, and then some big long sandy bits, and that is literally where Bonnie Prince Charlie arrived in Scotland after being chased and harried by the British Navy off the shore, snuck in there, spent his first night in Scotland as he prepared for the 1745 Jacobite Rising. But what I loved, I went back recently and read the accounts of what that first night was like. There was a storm, and it was him and his 7 mates or something like that, and a handful of people. They all spent the night in a cottage, just like a basic cottage down by the beach. And he'd never been in a black house before. So in a black house, thick thatch, no chimney, just a wee hole in the roof, and a great big peat smoke fire in the middle.
Central hearth.
So it was reeking, like the air was thick with this peat smoke, and apparently it makes your eyes water like crazy. And big Bonnie Prince, he was raised in Italy and France as a prince. He'd never been anywhere like this. And apparently he kept on just getting up from the fire and going to take took deep breaths by the door because he was like really struggling with it. And eventually the landlord started getting him in trouble for it. He's like, come on, are you going to sit down? This bloody prince, he's got like ants in his pants. Are you out or are you in? Get out or come in and sit down by the fire. And he was getting raging. So Bonnie Prince Charlie, raised to be the next king of the entire kingdoms of Scotland, Ireland, England, and it was his first day in his kingdom, and he's getting in trouble. He's getting in trouble from the landlord in the cottage. I loved it.
Well, I often finish on a Gaelic part, but actually what I'm going to recommend is for folk to listen to a wee bit of Gaelic music. I think that's one great way for those who are maybe trying to think, how can I get a nice introduction to the Gaelic language?
Yes.
Listening to music in Gaelic's a beautiful way to do it.
So who they Spotifying?
Well, you know, a great friend of mine and just an absolute superstar is Julie Fowlis.
Yeah.
I think what she brings to our culture and music is again ambassadorial. She takes the stories and the old songs, particularly of her own islands of Uist, and just brings them to life in a very modern way. And I think she is an absolute special singer. But between her, Kathleen McInnes, Karen Matheson, Cathy Ann McPhee, we have a wonderful, wonderful group of singers. Actually, in the back of each of my cookbooks, I have a thing called my baking playlist. And it's a list of maybe 20 songs that you can listen to when you're in the kitchen baking. And so if you download one of those, enjoy the music, deep dive into some of these, and that'll be a great, wonderful introduction into the Gaelic language.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for joining us. Again, we'll do the Q&A podcast later in the week, and it's all just looking at your questions, your recommendations, the topics you want discussed. So you just get in touch with us. Coinneach, how to get in touch?
Yeah, so you can go to our Instagram. This is Scotland Pod. Ask the questions there, and we've got an email address.
It's podcast@scotsmagazine.com.
So get in touch anytime, and we'll speak later in the week.
Speak later in the week. Cheery and drasta.